Okay, hi, I'm going to show you the way I learned the unit circle and tips to be able to memorize it in an easier way. So, the first thing here, I have a circle and then I divide it into the way the unit circle is divided into. And then the first number that I'm going to start with is this one. And this one's always just going to be 0, which is like, that's always the one that you're going to remember because it's 0. And then none of them else have 0, so you're always going to remember this one. Then if you go across, you're going to end up this side. And this one's always going to be pi. Just always. So these are the ones that you should always memorize, at 0 and pi. Now, starting, the tip that I always use is to start with denominators. Denominator is the easiest way to start. And then I'm going to start with this one first because I'm going this way, rotating this way. So this is the first one, and this is going to be 6. The denominator is always going to be 6. Now, if you look at the line, this is the line for 6, and then this is going to be the line for 6. So the denominator is going to be 6 for this one. And if you go across, this is going to be 6, and this is going to be 6. So always 6. The outest points of the circle are going to be denominator of 6. Now when you look at the middle, because the way I see this unit circle is that you have a 90 degrees, so you have this. Then you have a V, and you have a middle one. This one's always going to be 6. This is where we are. The next one's going to be the middle one. This is what I call the middle one. So this right here, the denominator is always going to be 4. So this side, denominator is 4, denominator is 4, and denominator is 4. Now, the next one is going to be the outest on this side. And this one is going to be this one. That one's always going to be 3. So in this case, this one right here, 3 and 3 and 3. And the last one that we have is going to be, oh wait, I already did 6. It's going to be 2. For this right here and this right here. Now, when thinking of the numerator for 6, we're going to start with these 4 right here. 6, 4, 3, and 2. The numerator for these 4 numbers is always going to be pi. So you got pi here, pi here, pi here, and pi here. When you get to this number, this is when it's going to start to being a number with pi, and it's not going to be pi. So this right here, the numerator is not going to be pi. This, when you get to 2, that's when you're going to stop. The way I use to remember that numerator is I look at the previous denominator. So if you look this way, 2 was the previous denominator. So the numerator of this one is going to be 2 pi. Now, for the next radiant, if you look at the denominator of the previous, it's 3. So this is going to be 3 pi. This is the tricky part, because once you get to this side, you're not going to look at the previous. What you're going to do is you're going to add the first 2 denominators. So you got 3 and you have 2. So 3 plus 2 is 5. So this is going to be 5 pi over 6. Then you get to pi here. When you add, because like I always pretend that this is 1 pi, so 6 plus 1 pi gives me 7 pi. So at this point, you should have pi 6, pi 4, pi 3, pi 2, 2 pi 3, 3 pi 4, 5 pi 6, pi, and 7 pi 6. If you look at the numbers, you're starting with pi's, then you're increasing, and this is the point. Once you get to 7, this is the highest point. Now you're going to decrease. Okay. Now, I'm going to stop going from this order, and I'm going to start here. When you have 2 as a denominator, oh, I have black. When you look at 2 as a denominator, you're going to look at the previous denominators around it. So if we have 3 and 3, this is going to be 3 pi. Now I'm going to do the same for this number here, and I'm going to look at the previous denominator, and I see it's 4, so it's going to be 4 pi. Now for this one right here, I'm going to do the logical number here because I have 4, then I have 3, and then I have this number right here that I'm missing. If I'm going, this is how I memorized it, where it's odd. Where if I'm going from 4 to 3 to 5, instead of going 3, 4, and this one, I'm going from 4 to 3. So the logical number is going to be 5 pi. Next, it's going to be the same in this situation, where I have 7 pi, 6, I have 7, and then I have x, and then I have 4. So I'm going from 7x to 4. If I'm decreasing, I'm going to use a logical number that belongs here that makes sense, that a number that is between 7 and 4, and it's a number that I'm repeatedly using. I've already used 5 pi, so I'm going to use 5 pi. I'm not going to use 6, even though 6 also makes sense. I'm not going to use 6 because I've never used 6 as a numerator. I've used it as a denominator, but never as a numerator. So 5, I have used it before, so it's more logical that it's going to be 5 instead of 6. But it makes sense because 5 is between 7 and 4. Now, and also for this one, a helpful tip to remember that it's 5, you can count what 3 plus 2 is. And it makes sense. Now, you should be left with 2 more numerators. To find this numerator, you just look across the line. If you look at it here, this is our line. If you look at this line straight across, you have 5 and 6. 5 plus 6 is 11. So this right here is 11 pi. 11 pi is the only numerator that you have not repeated besides 2 pi. Now, this is the last one, last numerator that I need to find. And to find this, you do the same thing where it makes sense, where you have 5, then you have an x, and then you have 11, and you look at a numerator that you have repeated. And then if I look at all my numerators, the one that makes sense that fit will be, 6 fits, 8 fits, 9 fits, 10 fits, but I've never used those numbers besides 7. So this is going to be 7 pi. And that gives you all of the radians. And now, to remember let me just erase this. To remember the coordinate, the most helpful tips I have is when looking, the first thing you want to do is look at the denominators. Denominators is what's going to help you remember. Now, if the denominator is 6, your denominator is 6, then your x coordinate is going to be square root of 3 over 2, and your y value is going to be 1/2. Always going to be your x value, always going to be your y value if it's a 6 as the denominator. Next is 4 as a denominator. When you have 4 as your denominator, your x coordinate is always going to be square root of 2 and square root of 2. Repeat x and y value are the same numbers. Next is 3 as your denominator. If 3 is your denominator, it's the same as 6 denominator, except you flip the numbers. So instead of x coordinate being square root of 3 over 2, it's going to be 1/2. And then your y value is going to be square root of 3 over 2. Always. So again, if the denominator is 3, then your y value is 1/2 no matter what. And your y value is going to be square root of 3 over 2. I need to make space. So 1/2 and then square root of 3 over 2. So lastly, the only numbers that you should have left for coordinates that are missing would be the cross. So right here, right here, right here, and right here, because that's the cross. Now for this one, you always have to look and imagine the x and y line. So this right here is the x line, and then right here is the y line. If you're in this position right here, then you're 1 in the x coordinate, and then your y is you're 0. Similar to here, if you're right here down here, then your y value moved, but your x coordinate stay the same, so it's going to be 0, 1. Actually, your y is negative. Now, for this coordinate, if you moved upwards in the y value and you stay the same in the x value, it's going to be 0 and positive 1. While here, if you move this way in the x, so you're going to have negative 1, but your y value is going to be 0 because you didn't move your 0. The only thing you have left before you can finish is that you have to look at the position of your coordinates, because some of these coordinates are negative and some of them are non-negative, and all of them right now you have them as positive besides the orange ones, so you have to go back and fill in the negative. But as of now, you have all the numbers, but you still have to put, if they're negative, you have to put that they're negative. So the way you have to look at it, I'm going to erase a little bit, but the ideal thing that you need to know is that if this is a coordinate right here, if you're in this position, all of these values, the x are always going to be positive, and then the y value, they're always going to be positive because they're in 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. They're all in the positive section. But if you're in this section, if you look at the x coordinate, they're in the negatives, because this would be negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. So you're in the x, the negatives. However, the y values, they're upwards. And if they're upwards, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, so they're positive. Then on this side, x, you're still negative, because you're still negative 1, 2, but the y value, you're now in the negatives. Same here, the x coordinates positive, but the y value is negative. So now you would go back to your coordinates, like on this one, this x value is going to stay positive, this one's, however, is going to stay negative. This one, both would stay positive, however, on this side, the x coordinate will be negative. On this side, both of these numbers would be negative. Then you're going to go back, the same for the next one. This one, my y value needs to be negative, same for this one. Then over here, both of these have to be negative. On this side, my x values have to be negative, so I have to put negatives here, and on this side, they all stay positive. And that is how you've already finished your coordinates, you already finished your radians, and that's it. Thank you.